And a good spiritual morning to you once again. I'm Father Guzmas. Thanks for joining me today for a quick chat and, of course, our morning cup of coffee. And I've got the Carmel mug going for today because I was blessed recently to go with my family and visit Carmel by the Sea and Monterey in general. And I wanted to share a little bit of that, just the experience and the feeling of it. And talk about it spiritually because I grew up going to that area, to the Monterey Bay and that area. My papu, my father's father, my grandfather actually lived there and passed away there in the late 80s, early 90s. And so I grew up through the 70s and 80s going through that area, through Monterey. We would stop, drive through Carmel and see Pebble Beach, go through Monterey, go up around and see Capitola and Santa Cruz and spend time around there in those areas, New Brighton, Seacliff. And so I recently got a chance to go back and see the area, and I hadn't been back there since my papu passed away, so over 30 years. And this was the most amazing part of the experience, that it all sort of just came right back. Right? You're sort of just driving around that area, seeing the beaches, seeing those pine trees, smelling the eucalyptus and the mix with the pine and being on the cliffs there at the ocean, that marine layer that rolls in, the moderate temperatures, the boardwalks, like all of that sort of just, all of a sudden I was 8 years old again. It all just kind of came back, kind of flooded back to me. And it sort of reminded me that in the spiritual life, the same thing can happen. We go to church, and if it's the church that we've grown up going to, we can feel that sense of childhood flooding back to us. How many places smell like our church? We walk in, we see, just before you even get in the building, just driving up onto the site, onto the parking lot area there, walking through where the grass is, where the bushes are, reminds us of being, when it's our childhood parish, of growing up there, of spending years and years there. And we get into the building and we see the icons and we smell the incense that's sort of soaked in and permeated into every surface. And it's a feeling like no other. We feel like we're home. And it was a good feeling to be there again. I hadn't been there in many years in that area where I grew up going and taking little family trips to see my papu, my grandfather. And I sort of thought, I didn't think about it for many years, but I thought I wasn't processing that I had gone or hadn't gone until I got there and it all sort of flooded back. And I'm wondering if the same thing isn't true for our experience with church. There's still a lot of people that are trying to recover from COVID. And when I say recover, I mean not physically. Physically, we're getting better. But in terms of our lives, in terms of our habits. And we've broken some good habits and some good routines. And I think coming to church is one of them. We still don't see a complete recovery from COVID. We can tell that we're still missing a lot of our families. I think that's happening across the country. We're starting to get people to come back, but everyone's not back. Some people are still sort of taking a break. And there was a legitimate reason to take a break, when we were going through the pandemic. But now things have sort of subsided. And there are people living their lives in other respects. They're out at work, they're going to other events, but when it comes to church, for whatever reason, they just haven't come back. And so I guess my experience at going back to Monterey and being back where I grew up going and seeing that, wow, all of that experience was just in me, was just in there, would be to share that with you and say, you know what, your experience with being at church, even if you haven't been coming regularly, it's in there. It's just waiting to come out. All you have to do is come back. Just come back, because it's an amazing thing. You didn't know that you missed it as much as you think, but when you come back, you really missed it. And that's how I felt going back to Carmel and Capitola and being in Monterey. And I thought, wow, all of a sudden I was, 8, 10 years old, being at the beach, smelling bonfires, smelling pine trees, feeling, that really salty air. And I hadn't experienced that in 30 years, but it was there. And it's the same thing when we come to church. We miss coming to God's house. We miss feeling loved and accepted. And that's how we should feel, because that's how God thinks of us. He loves us. We're His children. We're precious in His sight. And we should remember that. Why would you not want to go somewhere regularly where you feel precious? Because that's how we are in the eyes of God. And that's really something that we need and we should want in our lives. Not when I get to it, not once in a while, not once or twice a year. Why not want that every week? Why not want that a few times a month? And if we can sort of start by saying, you know what, yeah, I'd like to go back and see what it's like. Once you get there, you feel that embrace of memory, right? As if you grew up there, and it's this wonderful, safe, familiar feeling. And then we start to move forward and grow in our relationship with Christ because we feel that wonderful, safe, familiar, childlike feeling. And that's a feeling we should chase and a feeling we should want, and we should want it each and every day. Amen.